Hey everyone, this is WobblyWallaby. Today I'll be discussing the Thanatos hero class. I'll be analyzing the class and comparing it to existing classes so you know what tier this class is. What tier do you think Thanatos is? Stay tuned to find out. Thanatos is a hero class, which is a new style of class that ROM is pushing lately. This is evident through the new classes that are being released and the collab classes as well. Hero classes have very few skills when compared with traditional classes. This means that the gameplay tends to be more linear as you have less skills to use. You can also invest in every single skill so you don't have to pick and choose. One problem is these classes tend to be very heavy on advanced ruins for late game progression. Luckily for the Thanatos class, even without any second line ruins, it is quite strong. I have tested this out with a ruinless Thanatos and an account with 10% deposits. I'll first cover my Thanatos build, and then I'll analyze this class against various criteria so a tier can be assigned to it. I'll cover the skills first since it will help explain the way the class is built. Hero classes have a core passive skill. The more second line advanced ruins you have, the stronger your character will be. Currently I have no second line ruins, so I only have level 1 Dark Fate. If you can get to level 4, which means you have 3 second line ruins, then your max frenzy increases to 150. If you have 6 second line ruins, then your phase 1 creates an insane AoE donut and you do heavy roll automatically. Also, each level will give you more demi-human damage reduction and an additional penetration percentage that can be stacked up to 3 times. At max level, you can get 15% penetration, which is insane. Here's a chart that came from TeamLeaks. I'll put a link in the description. The unfortunate thing is the probability to get a second line ruin is 6% for all of these ruins, so this is going to be a ruin killer. If you don't have enough ruins, it'll be very hard for you to level up your core passive. Next, let's take a look at the skills. First is phase 1 Calamity. If you're at max core passive, you deal a huge AoE circle around you. Also, it uses both attack and magic attack, so it scales quite well late game. The abysmal mark, which is caused by this skill, also scales like crazy later on, so subsequent hits with this skill will be quite high. You can see my CPT Thanatos murdering mobs with this skill. This skill is very good for Oracle Elite 9. When I'm not at max core level, my phase 1 range is quite small, so it's not super effective in Oracle, or for clearing mobs. Next is phase 2 Heavenly Retribution. This skill becomes active after you cast phase 1. Again, attack and magic attack are used in this formula as well as the abyssal mark. After casting phase 2, phase 3 gets even stronger and now lets you vanish for 1 second for some invulnerability and also hits a target with Nightmare. Nightmare is a super annoying thing for PvP. Nightmare does not affect bosses, but it does affect mobs. After you cast phase 3, you can get even stronger with phase 4, Finish Move, which is the strongest skill in that sequence. The multiplier of 3200 is insane and scales with magic attack, and the abysmal mark. Next is the skill Dark Cycle, which restores your frenzy. A lot of Thanatos skills require frenzy, so you have to make sure you always have enough. This skill will make sure you recover quite a bit, so it's nice to have. I often have phase 1 and this Dark Cycle in my auto attack bar. This skill does remove the abysmal marks from your targets, so sometimes you may want to manually cast this. If I need to manually cast this, I cast this after the phase 4 attack. Next is Heart of Steel. This gives you great damage reduction. Unfortunately, this makes you start at phase 1 again, so only cast this after phase 4. The duration is also only 5 seconds, which is a bit low. Runes can help with increasing the duration. Next is Nightmare, which is a unique debuff for Thanatos. It makes them unable to move unless they get hit by 2 attacks, and also removes the target's buff. This is fantastic for PvP and one of the most broken skills for Thanatos. This does affect mobs, but it does not affect bosses. Next is the skill Demonic Thrill. It gives great HP and penetration percentage. However, the great thing about this skill is turning you into a demon, which means you can bypass the demi-human reduction from bosses and players. You'll see a big damage spike, especially when you do legend runs, since the demi-human reduction is quite large. You also get the bonus of having Endure to avoid the hit stun, and that lasts for 30 seconds with a 50-second cooldown. I also think this is one of the most broken skills for Thanatos. Next is Heavy Roll. This has a high damage multiplier for physical attack, and you can use it against low board MVPs. If you have the max core passive, you also get to cast this for free when you hit stuff for extra damage when casting your phase attacks. If you have very low magic attack, then this may outdamage the phase 1 if you're attempting to one-shot something. Next is Magic Sword Mastery. This can help you block enemy damage and also increase your magic attack. This passive is nice to have, especially for boosting your magic attack. Next is the skill Alone into the Night. It gives great damage increase. Also, if you don't have a 50% mount, this gives you a 30% move speed increase instead of a 25% move speed from the mount. So this is a nice bonus. These days, getting a 50% mount is quite expensive or very difficult to get depending on what server you're in. So it's nice that this game is taking pity on you for not having a 50% move speed mount. Lastly is Burden of Sins, which is for PvP since it gives attackers fear or poison effect. From looking over all these skills, you can see that magic attack and physical attack add to this damage, so it is advisable to boost these as much as possible. Here is my gear that I use for dealing with legend bosses, where I need 200% ignore defense. For offhand, I use the Voodoo Blade with the 30% ignore defense random attribute. For card, I use the Alice Star card. You can also use the Dragonbone Shield if you have enough ignore defense. I don't have any morale and chance on my gear, otherwise I'd switch to Dragonbone Shield instead. If you don't have the Alice Star card, then the Marilyn Roland card is quite good for MVP damage, or you can choose cards that deal 5% damage to certain monster types like the Dark Shadow card. You can adjust this depending on your target. For armor, I use the Horror Bones Battle Gear since it adds physical and magic attack. I have the damage and magic damage plus 10% random attribute. For card, I have the Moonax Star card for more ignore defense. Other cards you can consider are the Gloom card or the Poi Tai Star card. For garment, I have the Leader's Pauldron for ignore defense and skill damage. This is the best in slot, so there is no alternative. I have an 8% skill damage random attribute for this garment. For card, I use the Mastering Star card for the physical damage increase. For alternative cards, you can use the Mayfair Lens card for more MVP damage, or the Vagabond Wolf Star card for more strength and attack percentage. Next, for boots, I use the Dragon Slayer War Boots with the penetration percentage random attribute. Boots of Balance with the 6% damage and magic damage increase is the boots I would use if I had a better random attribute. This will increase your physical attack and your magic attack. For cards, I use the Familiar Star card for more magic attack. Next, for my first accessory, I use the Gold Earring with the plus 4.5% penetration random attribute, and the Moonlight Tendrillion Star card. For my second accessory, I use the Floral Hair Clip for the magic attack increase. I also use the Moonlight Tendrillion card for the Floral Hair Clip. For accessories, there's quite a bit of flexibility. You can use the Gold Earring for the penetration percentage, the Pendant of Eugen for the physical damage increase, or the Floral Hair Clip if you have a lot of magic attack. For Ancient Relic, I use the Waze Sai for the attack and attack percentage. Next, for weapon, I use the Sword of Hogyn, which is the new weapon for Thanatos. I have a Menorah Star card and a normal Menorah's card. My second Menorah Star card is deposited into my handbook, so I can activate the 50% ignore defense from the deposited Menorah's card. For headwear, I use the Homestead of Snowy Owl with the Machine Dragon Wing card. If you don't have this gacha, then White Knight Helm and the Andre Star card are good alternatives. For face, I use the Winter Crown for the skill damage. A free-to-play alternative is the Silent Sinking or Angel Spirit. For mouth, I use Huge Bounty for MVP damage. The free-to-play alternative is the Abyss Whisper for both attack and magic attack percentage increase. For back, I use Love Goddess for the final damage. A free-to-play alternative is the Soul Music or Devil Wing. For tail, I use the Rock Bunny. Free-to-play alternatives include the Ice Ridge for Ignore Defense or the Summer Banana Split for MVP damage. For attributes, because I'm using the Mastering Star card, I max out Luck first and then Strength and Int after. If I didn't have the Mastering Star card, I would max Strength, Int, and then the rest in Vit. My build is like a glass cannon build that maximizes damage but doesn't have much health. I heavily rely on anti-death food or faith prey from a priest. With my gear, here are my stats. I have 22,000 attack and 21,000 magic attack. I have 37.5% penetration. I have 31% skill damage increase. I have 135.6% damage increase. I have 92.4% physical damage increase. I have 200.5% ignore defense. For Oracle Mirror, I use the Bill for the MVP damage and the Death Cat armor for stun resist. Next, from my Adventure Handbook, I have 2,500 attack and 1,700 magic attack. I also have 56% attack depot and 56% magic attack deposits. Next, for Aesir Monument, prioritize Ignore Defense, Damage Percentage, and Magic Damage Percentage. For Thanatos, the Aesir doesn't give you any new skills, just buffs to your character. If you're able to fill all the Aesir Monument nodes, this is what you'll get. The 18% Ignore Defense and the 20% damage and magic damage increase are quite insane. Next is my Advanced Ruins setup. I don't have any second lines. First is the Final Showdown Star Ruin. Next is Iron Will Ruin. Next is Dark Flashback. Next is Burden Mine Ruin. Next is Perpetual Nightmare Star Ruin. And finally, the Demon Descent Star Ruin. Good luck getting your second lines. It's hard enough already to get a second line, but if you want the ideal first line, then that will help a lot. Next, for my auto and manual skills, I first have Nightmare on the manual bar, then Dynamic Thrill, then Heart of Steel, then the Phase 1 attack, and then Dark Cycle. For auto attack, I have the Phase 1 attack, and sometimes I'll also put the Dark Circle in there as well. I've noticed that sometimes the Dark Circle can be a bit glitchy and ends up casting way more often than it should be. In that case, you can remove it from the auto bar and just have your Phase 1 attack. For your guild blessings and prayers, you definitely want to increase your physical attack and magic attack. This will help you scale your damage quite a bit. For my character, I had maxed out all the physical attack attributes, and then I ended up maxing out my magic attack because this was once useful for my Ruin Master, but now is useful for Thanatos as well. Next, I'll discuss the tier list for a few criteria. I'll include some key classes for references, and I'm still working on a full tier list for the future with all the classes. First is how free-to-play friendly this class is. Lightbringer, Dorum, and Thanatos are S tier. All three have very high damage output, even with low deposit and gear. For A tier, Soulbinder and Novice Guardian are good. The reason why Novice Guardian is up here is because you get very good damage to Zenny ratio. Once you have the Advanced Ruins, your damage output will be quite high. In B tier is Taekwon, which does require very good gear and ruins to play. In C tier is the Auto Attack Ruin Master. It is heavily reliant on having a very good Adventure Handbook for high attack, magic attack, and deposit percentage. Next is late game and pay to win viability. S tier is Taekwon, Ruin Master, Thanatos, and Novice Guardian. all of these can solo certain legend instances and can deal a significant amount of damage. You do need high-end gear and deposits. Dorum, Lightbringer, and Soulbinder are A tier. In general, these classes cannot carry legend runs as their continuous DPS is too low. When I use my whale account on CBT, Thanatos can easily clear the Oracle Elite 9 and the legend runs by itself. The scaling of attack and magic attack is quite insane. Next for farming, Dorum and Lightbringer are A tier. Both can summon units to help it farm and have good AoE skills. Lightbringers also have good passives to increase earnings. For B tier, Runemaster, Thanatos, and Soulbinder are average for farming. All can deal AoE damage, but due to the density of the maps, it isn't ideal for level 170 character. In D tier are Taekwon and Novice Guardian. Both are terrible for farming. Next is damage scaling for skills. Runemasters, Thanatos, Novice Guardian, and Lightbringers are top tier, since their damage is affected a lot by multiple factors. Also, these skills are quite powerful by itself. For A tier, I put Dorum, Lightbringer, and Taekwon. I think their damage scaling isn't as high as the other S tier classes, but they're still quite good. For B tier, I put Soulbinder because I feel like the damage scaling is quite fair for this class. It isn't super broken compared to the other classes here. Next is survivability. I put Runemaster, Dorum, and Novice Guardian as S tier since they all have anti-death skills. For A tier, I put Taekwon since it has physical damage and magic damage immunity skill. For B tier, Soulbinder, Lightbringer, and Thanatos have ways to reduce damage, but is not as good as the other classes. Next for boss hunting, I put Runemaster, Taekwon, Novice Guardian, and Soulbinder at the top. They can deal a lot of damage, especially against high-end MVPs. A tier would be Lightbringer. It has good burst, but if you can't one-shot it, then it gets a bit awkward. Lightbringer is definitely harder to deal with some of the high-end MVPs as well. For B tier, I put Thanatos and Dorum. Thanatos' initial phase 1 damage is quite low. Only on higher phases does the damage get very good. Same with Dorum, the burst is typically not that high. Here's a video of me hitting an MVP with the first hit. The damage is quite underwhelming, and only subsequent hits are good. On competitive channels, people would have stolen this kill already, since the phase 1 damage is so low. Next for PvE, Runemaster, Taekwon, Novice Guardian, and Thanatos can carry legend runs, so there's a lot of potential there, and they are S tier. A tier is Dorum, since they can deal a lot of damage, but it's less unfair than the S tier classes. For B tier, I put the Lightbringer and Soulbinder. They can do good burst damage, but not continuous DPS, which is required for PvE instances. My Thanatos can deal quite a bit of damage in Komodo and Lost Isles runs. Here I'm trying to solo Legend Isles against the Magma Golem. My Thanatos does decent damage considering how suboptimal my build is. I don't have a plus 15 weapon, I'm missing a bunch of gear, and I have no second line ruins. For Thanatos Tower Legend, it does struggle a bit since I couldn't convert elements very easily. I also didn't like being put into hit stun, which interrupts my attacks. For Oracle, if you are strong enough to one-shot the mobs, then it is really good. Otherwise the AoE from the phase attacks can be frequently interrupted, which can be super annoying. Next for support, I put Soulbinder, Dorum, and Lightbringer as S tier, since they can provide great buffs or support for your teammates. At A tier is Runemaster and Novice Guardians, which can provide some party buffs. For Thanatos and Taekwon, they either don't give any party buffs or their party buffs are not very effective, so I'm putting this as C tier. Next for PvP, Thanatos, Runemaster, and Novice Guardian are S tier. Thanatos is especially annoying with the Nightmare skill and also how high the damage from the phase skills are. For other classes, I put them as A tier since they are very viable for PvP. Next, one factor that I'd like to bring up is the Runemaster issue. People may have tried the auto-attack Runemaster build, but felt like it was underwhelming due to their deposit. Also, if you have problems getting Holy Avengers since it's always on snapping, then Thanatos can be a nice alternative class. Luckily for Thanatos, you can always create your weapon and it doesn't require MVP materials. So it's quite easy to get to plus 15, whereas trying to get a plus 15 heavens is very hard, and super expensive as well. Building a Thanatos is definitely a lot easier in my opinion. Overall, Thanatos is quite powerful, so I would definitely put it at an S or A tier. Luckily, there's lots of potential for both new players and endgame players, which makes this class very flexible. I like classes that can scale well late game, so you can see some progression. Are you going to get the Thanatos hero class? Or if you already have, how are you enjoying this class so far? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe.